you spoke to Mrs. Talbot, did she say she'd like to do this?
Yes.
Yeah.
She has been interviewed, I don't know by whom.
Yes, but this is something different.
But this is something different,
Yeah.
and she would like to do it.
Well, if you give her my number.
I give her your number.
Date November the 1st, 1995. Survivor Lily Stern. Interviewer Rebecca Hafner-Kraus. In the city Rehovot, Israel. Language English. My name's Rebecca Hafner-Kraus. The date is the 1st of November 1995. I'm conducting an interview with Lily Stern in Rehovot, Israel, in English. Could you tell us your name?
Lily Stern.
And your name when you were born?
Lily Schwartz.
And you were born when?
I was born in 1923 on the 2nd of March.
And how old are you now?
I'm 73.
And you were born where?
I was born in Bratislava, the capital of Slovakia. And
okay. Would you like to tell us something of your childhood before the war?
yes, my childhood was very, very good. I was the youngest child of 5 children. I had 2 brothers and 2 sisters, and I was raised by them mostly because there was a great difference in age. And we lived on a farm near Bratislava, which was a beautiful, beautiful farm. My parents rented that. It was about 400 acres, and the village people were working on the farm. My older brother...
What was the name of the village?
Fish. And it had a different name, of course, but Czechoslovakia. It was Komarniansky Fish. And I went to school there, but only primary school, because there weren't any secondary schools. So all of us children were sent to the city, to Bratislava, for studying. I studied in a gymnasium in Bratislava, and until 1938.
What was your father and mother's occupation?
Farmers.
They were farmers.
They were farmers. Actually, the whole family of my father were all farmers. And I went to school in Bratislava, as I said, till 1938, when the part where we lived was occupied and taken back to Hungary.
Was your family a religious family?
Yes,
Yeah.
my family was religious, but we were brought up to be very liberal. We had contact with non-religious people, even with Christians, and I went to a non-Jewish school, but my parents were very observant and very religious.
Were there other Jews in the village?
Only another family. Nearby, my father established a synagogue and brought over a shochet, and on holidays we went and prayed there. It was a shtibel. And
What was the name of that village?
Chicho. And that was about 3 kilometers away from us. So on Shabbatot we used to walk there. And there were more Jews than in our village. So actually that's how we had a minyan with them together. And my brothers, and from the other family, their sons. So we had a minyan. That's how we kept the. Actually, my Jewish education, that means to pray and to read Hebrew, was given by the son of the shochet, who was local and came to give me lessons. My older brothers and sisters, they were in Bratislava, and they already went to Jewish school there.
Mm-hmm. What language did you speak at home?
At home we spoke Hungarian,
Mm-hmm.
but we always had somebody that were like a governess, would you say? So we spoke German as well.
Mm-hmm. And Yiddish?
And Yiddish was not spoken, not in that area. And we went, as I said, I went to school in Bratislava, but that was already a Slovak school. So I had to learn Slovak, and that was the language of the country, so my parents thought that I should learn the language, which is very important later on, which I did. And as I said, till 1938 I went to the school, but in 1938 it was given back to Hungary, that part where we lived, so I was taken home.
Mm-hmm. Let's just go back to before 1938. Were you aware of the events that were happening in Germany from 1933?
We were aware by the press and by radio. We were aware of it, but nobody took it seriously. In other words, they thought it's there, but it's never going to happen here. And life just went on, and until such time as it really hit us.
Mm-hmm. And did you experience acts of anti-Semitism before 1938?
Not much. In Czechoslovakia, we didn't experience much anti-Semitism. I, for example, at school, I never experienced anything like that. But in 1938, the moment the Hungarians came in, anti-Semitism started. The second day after they entered, our windows were broken, and it was really felt.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how did your family react to the Anschluss in Austria in March 1938?
Well, they were shocked, and we were indirectly involved because we had family there. And a part of the family also escaped and came to Hungary, and we were hiding them. And three sons of that family came to our farm, and they stayed there for a length of time until such time as they could get false papers and then somehow settle.
Mm-hmm. And how did your life change then following the annexation by Hungary of the area that you lived in?
It changed radically. New laws came against the Jews. They took away shops. They took away later on, a year later, it came a law that Jews cannot have bigger farms than 20 acres. So our farm was much bigger than that, and of course it has been taken away. That meant that we had to move from that place. Luckily enough, near Dunajska Streda, that was a town about 45 kilometers away from us, there was...
Was that Hungary or Czechoslovakia?
That was Hungary at this point.
Mm-hmm.
It was Czechoslovakia beforehand, but it was Hungary by now. My father knew an old school teacher who had a beautiful house with about 20 acres land around it, and he retired and he let us have it. rented it to us, where my brothers, I must mention, by that time my younger brother, who finished business college, was then also released, or would I say sent from his position as a salesman. As a Jew, he couldn't get a position anymore, and he was home, and so did the older brother. And with them, they established there on that 20 acres a vegetable garden, which was with hot houses and things like that in a commercial way. And that was very successful, but it didn't last long because my two brothers have been taken away to labor camps. And so I stayed by myself with my parents to run this business, because my two sisters were married already. One sister was married in Budapest, and the other sister was married also in Hungary. And so I traveled twice a week to Budapest to sell the merchandise on a wholesale market, which also wasn't so easy because Jews couldn't sell directly to the buyer. They had to do it through an agent. And of course that meant already a part of the profit went to them. But everything, as you asked before, things were very, very much felt.
And how did you rationalize these anti-Jewish measures?
I don't know, we just accepted it somehow. There was no other way, and we just had to live with it.
Did you think things were going to get worse? Or?
Yes, everybody was afraid that things are going to get worse. Of course, nobody thought of the inevitable, but we thought it will get worse.
Mm-hmm. And did you ever discuss, you or your family discuss the possibility of leaving Hungary?
Yes. We had a cousin in America, and we thought, the whole family actually, it was a very big family of my father's, and that cousin said that he would send us some permits to emigrate. But of course it never eventuated, because in the meantime the war broke out, and actually it wasn't very fair. Money has been sent out beforehand and so on, and till today we don't know what happened to the money, but permits never arrived. Mm-hmm. And that's how the family stayed.
And what did you know about what was happening to the Jews in the rest of Europe till?
We knew because we had also family in Slovakia, for example. From Slovakia, Jews were deported much earlier than from Hungary, and we knew, and many escaped, many came across the border, and again we tried to hide them. It was punishable. If they found out that somebody is hiding a Jew from Slovakia, they were imprisoned, and so it was very, very difficult. But again, it didn't last too long. But we knew that from Poland it was happening, but we didn't know about gas chambers and things like that, which were already existing then, and Polish Jews were already being taken to these gas chambers and shot and then killed and so on. We didn't know the details. We only knew that they had been deported.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of contact did you have with your brothers who were in labor camps?
None whatsoever. They have been taken. One was taken to the Russian front.
What year?
It was in 1942. He was taken, the younger one was taken to the Russian front. The only news we had later on that he was captured by the Russians. Through the Red Cross we got this information. The other brother was taken to another labor camp in Hungary, which was one of the worst labor camps. He died from starvation there. But we never saw them again after they had been taken. And that was before we were taken.
Mm-hmm. And how did your non-Jewish acquaintances react to what was happening?
Well, in Hungary, these non-Jewish so-called friends turned against us. All they wanted, our property or goods or values. For instance, I have known my husband before I have been taken, and my late mother prepared me a trousseau. And the first thing was that I took it. These so-called good neighbors, they took everything. And they took the animals, and they took all that was of value. We couldn't do anything. Also, we had a gardener. He was a Bulgarian. They were supposed to be the experts in this. So my father hired him since the boys weren't home anymore. And one day he turned against my father and wanted to kill him with a knife. Luckily, he didn't succeed, and my father, with small injuries, escaped the horrible intentions of him. He also hit me. I still have got a scar under my nose where he hit me with the back of the knife. I went to the police and reported it. And you know what they told me? Lucky he didn't kill you. You want to stay here? We can arrest you. That's what the police said. So, from every side, there was danger and anti-Semitism and hatred. There was a certain unit. They were gendarmes, and they were the cruelest that you can imagine. Hungarian. The cruelest. The police wasn't even that bad, but they were so cruel that everybody was terrified of them. And of course they brought false accusations which never existed, and they punished people until 1944. That I have to tell you in detail. I saw my father for the last time when I went on my trip to Budapest to sell the goods. And I said goodbye to him in the morning. I went to the train
What date is?
That was the 18th of March 1944. And I went with a train to Budapest. My mother said she'll come after me, which unfortunately she did. And since my sister lived in Budapest, I always spent the night before the market there with her and a night afterwards. The 19th of March, the Germans occupied Budapest. And when we've heard that, my mother was already at my sister's. And when we've heard that, we decided that we are going to go home. That was on the 20th of March 1944.
Did you see German soldiers in Budapest?
Of course, by that time we saw German soldiers in Budapest. My sister had a little girl, 6 years old. Lovely, beautiful little child. And she had a maid. The maid was from our village. We sent her to her. And we decided that since already in Budapest already started the air raid, and they had to run into the air raid shelters all the time, that it would be safer and better for the child if we would take her with us and the maid. And so it was that on the 20th of March in the morning we went to the station, to the big central station in Budapest.
You and your mother and your niece?
And my sister accompanied us. She didn't want to come home with us, just to take us to the station. When we got there, there was already police and German soldiers, and they took papers and checked everybody. And those days, in passports, and they were already a sign that you are Jewish. So they straight away sent us in a lane, which we had to stand there, and many people were there already, of course all Jews. And we were standing there for hours on end until the police came and took us in a police van to a central police station, which had an enormous yard and that was already full with people, all captured on the streets and at stations, wherever. My poor mother, she was in such a shock that we were worried about her. Now, I had so much presence of mind that I went to the police there and I said, "Excuse me, but here is a non-Jewish lady with a child. What is she doing here? That we are here, I can understand. But why she? She is not Jewish. Where is she?" And she was such a primitive country girl. She couldn't speak up for herself. So whatever I said, she said yes. And so after about a half an hour after he spoke to his officer and so on, she was released with the child. And she went back to my sister's home. But my sister stayed with us. She was arrested. We stayed there for hours on end in this yard. It was March, it was early spring. It was still very cold, it was raining, it was full of mud, everything. And although my mother was only 54 years old, she was absolutely out of her mind. So at 6 o'clock in the evening, after many hours, a loudspeaker announced that we are to be taken into an internment camp because we are politically not trustworthy. So we started off. That internment camp was called Kistarcha, and it was approximately 18 to 20 kilometers away. We went by foot. Everybody had luggage. And we were carrying the luggage because we never knew when we needed it or if we will need it. And we walked through fields. We didn't know where and when are they going to shoot us or what are going to do with us, we didn't know. Towards the morning, still in darkness, because of the air raids, everything was dark. We landed there in that internment camp. We didn't know where we were. They put us into a big barn, a huge big barn, but hundreds of people. So there wasn't even room to sit down.
Men and women together.
Men and women together at this point. And then in the morning, they separated us. And they put the women separately into such barracks and men separately. There was no way to even lie down or straw or anything. And a day after that, they called us out on the yard, counted us, and then they put us into another barn where they undressed us and took our valuables away. Money, jewelry, everything. We were there 3 days before the Germans came.
These were Hungarians who
They were police, Hungarian police. And 3 days after the Germans came, they asked who is over 55. And my sister was crying and she begged my mother she should say she is more than 55 and go back to her child if they let them go. But I was very skeptical. I thought, why would they let the old people go? They probably want to get rid of them. Don't go. Anyway, my sister persuaded my mother, and she went. That was the last time we saw her. She went back, and then the Jewish organization in Budapest sent some parcels to us. We were the first ones at that time. There was no deportation yet. They weren't organized yet.
Just so I understand, so the old people were released?
They were released.
And she went back to your mother?
Yes, but how did we know that? That the Jewish organization sent some parcels. That means that the families of us, of the arrested ones, could send some food And my mother wrote on one of the packets of cheese, this triangle cheese, she wrote from the back side of it, she wrote, "I am home." And that's how we knew.
Were you given any other food?
Not much, but that wasn't the biggest problem then. We were 2 weeks in this internment camp. After 2 weeks, we were transported to a central station where there were cattle trucks waiting for us.
This is in Budapest.
That is in Budapest. And we were put onto these cattle trucks. 80, 90 people in one of those trucks. No room to sit down, no room to lie down. There were, luckily, not all the people with us.
Do you know how many people were in this action?
In this action, 450. So we were starting our journey, and
Second film, November the 1st, interview with Lily Stern by Rebecca Krauss in Rehovot. So you were describing the cattle trucks.
yes. So we started out on our journey, which lasted 3 days in these cattle trucks. There were no toilets. There was nothing. Everything happened inside. People fainted. We didn't get any food or to drink. We went through Slovakia, and from time to time the train stopped, and there was a small window on this cattle truck, and I asked the women and men, "Please, let me go through, let me get to the window. It's Slovakia. I saw the station name. Maybe I can speak to somebody." And so it was that opposite the cattle truck there was an engine, a steam engine. And the driver was in the steam engine. And I shouted to him in Slovak, "Where are we? Where are we going?" And he said, "To your death." He knew already from Slovakia. He saw many of those transports. And he said, "Wait." So he had some food with him there. And the German guards were marching up and down, watching the train. But this time they were on the other side of the train. So he gave us some water, not much of course, for 90 people, and some bread. Later on I'll tell you that when we came back I met the same man at the same station. So we continued with our journey. After 3 days, as I said, we arrived. We didn't know where, but we arrived. The doors opened. We had 2 dead. 2 men died on the way. And we had luggage. When the doors opened, all we saw was men coming in striped clothing and asked for our luggage. My sister was so naive. She said, "Oh, how nice of them. They don't want us to carry these heavy things." But of course, everything was thrown on a big truck, and we were ushered to stand in line. And we stood in line, but we had children also. I forgot to mention a few children in the cattle truck. Not in our, but in the rest of them. As we were standing there, a very good-looking tall man, an SS man, arrived on the scene with some more SS men and started to direct to the left, to the right, and he was doing the selection. Later on we found out it was Mengele who did that. We didn't know where we are going. Only later on we found out that we were selected to go to work, and the other side was selected to go to the gas chamber. Luckily I stayed with my sister, although many people were torn apart and never stayed together. We were 5 girls, still from the internment camp, that have been like sisters. We were so close, we didn't want it to part. And luckily we stayed together right through. We then were taken to a very huge barn where we got our tattooed number.
Could you tell us what the number is?
80,413. And we were tattooed according to alphabetical order. Then we were taken into another barn where we were stripped naked. All our clothing, everything was taken away, and we were shorn. Our hair was cut completely, and we were given clothing, which meant one dress, no underwear, and some shoes. But here I must say, they probably did it intentionally, that nothing fitted. The tall people got small clothes, the small people got big clothes, the shoes never fit, and when we started to exchange between ourselves, then we were punished and beaten.
The people that were giving you the clothes and that cut your hair, were they...
They were Jewish.
And did they speak to you?
Yes, but they were already brainwashed. They were Polish girls who were there for 2 and 3 years, and they ceased to be human somehow. They just wanted to survive, and they thought that if they do the job that the Germans asked them to do, then they will survive, and that's going to make them live. Which I understood the psychology only later on, because on the spot there, we couldn't understand them. Then we were taken to barracks barracks which had bunks. The bunks were relatively large bunks, but not big enough for having 8 or 9 people sleeping on it. We were put there. 1 or 2 people contracted measles amongst us, and we were put into quarantine, which meant that we were locked up there for 10 days. Very little food, which, if you can call it food, it was some kind of a liquid which tasted awful, like medicine, which later on we found out later on, that it had brome in it. Brome, which is some kind of medicine that relaxes you, so we shouldn't get hysterical or something. And there we had to be quiet. The SS people were walking up and down amongst, between the banks.
Can you describe your first night there?
It was something horrible. And the worst thing was that we needed to go to the toilet. And they didn't let us. Only after hours and hours, they sent us in a group to the so-called toilets, which was a very big barn with holes in there, and the SS people were watching. And if you stayed longer than a minute, then they whipped you.
These were men or women guards?
SS?
Yeah.
Women and men.
Mm-hmm.
Women and men. And there was one cruel man that said that he was a eunuch. And he was beating everybody, something fierce. Then we went back, and then we had to stand outside in the bitterly cold, with that one dress on. We were standing outside for hours, counting us. And then they sent us back again. And that's how it went for 10 days. After 10 days, they sent us out to work, which meant there were big rocks on a big, big heap of rocks. And we had to put them into what they were called chilies. There were little wagons, what they used in coal mines. And they went on rails. And we had to put all these rocks into these wagons and push it as far as we could, make another heap of these rocks, go back again, and that's how it went, from one heap to the other, just so to make us work. I got injured there. One rock fell on my finger, which I cannot till today move properly. I was petrified because they took me to the hospital, which was called Revier. And you know that in Auschwitz, if you stayed longer than 24 hours or 2 days there, then they took you to the gas chambers. So I didn't want to stay there. And there was a nice girl there, a Jewish girl, who bandaged it. And she sent me out, back again to work.
What did you know at that time of the gas chambers?
By that time we knew. by that time we knew. There were Polish girls there who have had a pleasure of telling us what's going to happen to us.
Polish Jewish girls.
Polish Jewish girls, yes, was telling us that we are going to die. And there they were. Later on, of course, I found out because we were sent there. It was called Canada. It was a place where you sorted clothes and shoes that were taken off from the unfortunate ones that went to the gas chamber. Some of the clothes were still warm and we had to select them. One day,
How did you have to sort them? By what criteria?
by size or by men's clothes separately, women's clothes separately, children's shoes separately, and so on. Luckily, we stayed only 2 months in Auschwitz. One day, they made us stand up, again counted us. It was 500 of us. Because by that time, from other camps, some transports came. And Mengele came, and we thought this is the end of us. And they separated people to this side and to that side. And we knew by then what it meant. And can you imagine? They separated me from my sister. So we were absolutely out of our minds. So there was this Jewish couple that Mengele asked, how many have we? You wouldn't believe it. There were 2 missing of the number that he wanted. And he went once again through the lands, and he pointed my sister out, and he sent her to my line. So everything was fate. And then we were sent to the showers, which we thought again that gas is going to come. We are going to die. No. They sent us to the showers, they gave us different clothes. Not much better, but different clothes. And they sent us again with cattle trucks. And as I said, that we are going to work. Where? They didn't tell us. Again, it took us a day and a half until we arrived there. That was in Sudetenland. The name of the place was Parshnitz. That was a labor camp for Polish girls. It wasn't a concentration camp yet. Only when we arrived, and later more arrived, it became a concentration camp, and it was a part of Gross Rosen, which was also a renowned camp. And we became, under the SS, a concentration camp. But conditions were much better than in Auschwitz. The food was a little bit better than in Auschwitz.
This was how long after you, when were you sent to Parshnitz?
2 months after we've been to, that was in March, April we went to Auschwitz. June. In June it must have been. You see, many things escape my mind now. They're not so clear anymore. But others are too clear, even today. And there was a factory which was producing linen, and we were sent there to work. It was very hard work. 4 o'clock in the morning, we had to march there. It was 1.5 kilometers. And we got there, we had to carry this very heavy, what do they call it, balls of cotton. And we had to work on it. It was full of dust. In the evening we were spitting up dust, black dust.
Do you know how many people were in this camp?
In this camp, in the end we were 2,000. At the beginning it was 600. And they brought from all over Germany, from camps, they brought to us. It was a factory building, which again with bunks, no windows, and there I sang to the Germans, to all the Germans. And the next day, after I sang for the first time, I knew many German songs. And after the next day, they called me. And they said, from today on, you work in the kitchen. So what was the work in the kitchen? It wasn't anything to do with food, but I had to clean the stoves. The ashes I had to take with a wheelbarrow far away, and that's what I have been doing all day. But it meant that I could steal some food for my family, which was the 5 girls and my sister, 4 girls and my sister. And that's how we survived for a while. Then one day,
What kind of food?
I stole raw potatoes, raw cabbage, raw turnip, raw beetroot, everything we ate raw. There was no way of cooking it. And one day, I was called and I was asked, do I know anything about gardening? And I said, yes, that was my profession. So from today on, you pick some girls and you go, and here is 2 acres of land for the SS kitchen, and you will grow some vegetables. I went there. 2 acres is a big plot of land. And there were already some carrots planted. And I did a good job with the girls. Of course, I took the 5 girls and some of the family. By that time, my aunt arrived there from another camp, and I took them there, and we worked. The only thing, we didn't get more food, we didn't get nothing more, and worked very hard. But what was good in this whole thing, that we needed vitamins, so we pulled out the not yet ready carrots, and we ate them, or the onions, or things. We could survive on that. And that's how my singing was helpful. Then one day I was in the kitchen, because when it was very bad winter weather, the girls were sent back to the factory and I was sent back to the kitchen. In the winter it was awful. No windows, one single blanket on the straw, and straw on the bank, and two of us on one narrow bank. And we were covered with snow in the morning when we woke up, because through the windows, the blizzard came right in. One day, I was caught stealing from the kitchen a turnip, and they locked me up. But where? There was a cellar, and in the winter, some water came up in the cellar, and in that water were rats floating, and they locked me in there. Very few people came out from there alive. What happened? It was like a sliding bitumen thing, and the doors were very old, rusty iron doors. And how, I don't know, but for my fear, I was begging constantly to get away from these rats. And as I was pushing back, the doors opened. And so I was out. But I was too afraid to go back because I figured they are going to throw me back again. So there was some straw outside, and I hid in the straw. And in the morning, I heard the soldiers, the steps coming closer and closer. So I went back to the door. And when they opened the door, of course I put on an act that I am not so well and so on. And they pulled me out. And I said, if I survived, then I can go back to my barrack. And that's how I survived. We were in Parshnitz till the day of the liberation.
Can you tell me, before we get on to the liberation, what kind of things did you talk about at night with your family? At night, when you had a chance to speak to them?
You wouldn't believe it. We were cooking, giving recipes to each other. The hunger made us dream about food all the time. And other people knew how to recite poems. So they said poems. The one who could sing was singing. Just to keep sane, we did all these sort of things.
Mm-hmm.
And as little as possible, we were talking about our past, that means about the family, because we wanted to remain sane. And that was how we spent our evenings, which wasn't terribly much, because by the time in the evening we were exhausted.